Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. And thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. Really, it means a lot. I know I say it at the beginning of every podcast, and I say it because it's the most important thing to really let you know that I massively appreciate your listenership, and I'm so happy you're here. Now, if you've been a longtime listener, or you have been, a frequent listener as of late, I would so appreciate it if you would head on over to iTunes and rate and review the show, hopefully in a positive light. And I know here I am at the outset of a new podcast asking you for something, but it's for a really good reason. I love this show. I care about this show. I believe in the message of this show so deeply that I'm willing to humble myself every week and ask for your help to spread the message of the show. The more women who hear messages like the Grace and Grit message, that much closer we are to mending the female health story. Because let's face it, our culture has gotten the female health story really jacked up. And I want to help unravel that and bring us home. I'm not saying I can do it alone, not by any stretch. There are so many people doing incredible work in line with this very message. This is my small part, and I would massively appreciate it if you would take a couple seconds out of your day to let other people know that this is a show worth listening to, if you think it is. If not, please don't go to iTunes and leave a review. Now, we have been talking all month long about creating and living your best summer ever. And I explained in episode 172, which was our first episode in this theme, about why I chose the theme. And I really gave you some simple strategies and questions to start answering to cultivate your best summer ever. Now, here's the honest to God truth. Are you going to create your best summer ever by becoming more intentional about how you're living this year? Maybe not. But here's what I do know. I bet you're going to live a way better summer than you would have had you not been intentional about how you lived it. So let me tell you what's showing up for me, right? I went into this summer very intentional about not overscheduling myself, about being very fully present with my son, about making more time for camping trips and swims in the lake and things of that nature. And all the same challenges and problems that I normally have are showing up in my life, right? The day-to-day stuff. I still have bills to pay. And I shouldn't even say that's a problem, right? I'm lucky that I have bills to pay. That's how I really look at it. But still, it's not all that pleasurable all the time to pay bills. I still have a house to clean. I still have a child to raise, and it's kind of all these hats I'm trying to wear in my life. So there's a little bit of balancing act. My Great Dane puppy walked through the yard the other morning and walked through dog poop and then brought that poop through my house. That was fun. So I still have these challenges. But what's different is that I'm approaching those challenges with such a different mindset. I'm approaching them with the mindset of letting go, of not getting tangled up and making the problems bigger than they need to be, because I am going to have a great summer. And so it's completely shifted my energy. I hope that's happening for you too. If not, I wonder if you have been reminding yourself daily about the commitment you made to yourself, about your summer. Maybe you haven't even made a commitment to your summer. Maybe you should. I also want to remind you, in case you have not heard, you did not know, or you forgot, that we created an unbelievable free document for you to improve your podcast listening, specifically to this show, of course. So we created a document that highlights all the key takeaways of every episode in this monthly theme, Best Summer Ever. I ask you some pointed questions on that document so you can actually start processing and applying what you're learning. And I also give you some resources, additional resources for the topics that we're discussing. So if you want access to that, it is totally free. We do need your email address so we know where to send it. And if you register, even just for this month's theme, you will receive all future roadmaps for all of our future themes. So you certainly don't have to, but if you're looking for ways to kind of keep track of all this information and start applying it to your life, the reminders are really helpful, and that's why we created it. Now, in the second episode of this month, which was last week, episode 173, we tackled the issue of body image. And I really talked about how much your thinking is driving the way you feel about your body. And this is a really big and very relevant conversation, specifically for women, men too, but mostly women are listening to this show. And it's really even more relevant this time of year because there's a little bit more exposure of our bodies, right? We're wearing shorts, we're wearing tank tops and t-shirts and swimsuits, and there's just a lot of opportunity to go down a deep, dark hole of body shaming ourselves. And so I really talked about stepping into a space of recognizing all that's right with your body as it is, everything it's doing well in this moment, having gratitude for how well your body shows up for you, regardless of how you're really treating it. I talked about ways to start developing respect and ultimately self-love. Now, some people reached out to me and asked a very good question. They said, Courtney, if I love myself as I am right now, doesn't that mean I'm going to be unmotivated to improve myself? And I don't think that's true at all. I think the opposite is true. And here's why. Self-love is not about giving yourself permission to not take action where action needs to be taken. I guess it's something that I think might help you to think of this maybe a little differently is think of something in your life you love deeply and hard. Maybe it's your kids, maybe it's your dog, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your house, maybe it's your career. Whatever the things are in your life that you deeply and truly love, do you show up less for those things or do you show up more? I would argue it's the latter. You take better care of the things that you really, truly love. Not taking care of yourself, not showing up to fill the gaps in your life where you identify there are gaps, that is not love. Just as using self-discipline to the point of self-destruction is not love. I often talk about how I believe that self-discipline, the type of self-discipline that I promote, is born out of self-love. And if you're beating yourself into the ground to change yourself because you hate the way you look, that's not coming from love. And you most certainly cannot hate your way healthy. When you love yourself, when you really love yourself, you are far more likely to do the work that honors your body, mind, and soul more consistently. Which leads me to the topic I want to discuss this week. Reclaiming your power around food and alcohol this summer. And really, this whole conversation could be about reclaiming your power around food and alcohol all year round. I just threw in the title summer because we're kind of in a summer theme. Summer presents us with a lot of opportunity to celebrate, to travel, to enjoy the company of family and friends, which can be massively challenging for women who are trying to improve their relationship with food and alcohol because we're being presented with a lot more alcohol and food choices that aren't necessarily serving our goals this time of year than other times of the year. I would say the only other time of year that I can think of that is very closely related to this time of year would be the holidays. right? That's another time of year where we're constantly bombarded by more alcohol, more food, more sugar, less sleep, more opportunities to get less sleep. Summer really takes us out of routine and can in many ways encourage us to indulge in things we might not otherwise indulge in. So in order to improve our power or reclaim our power around food and alcohol, we need to recognize why we're challenged by food and alcohol, specifically in social settings. Because that's really one of the main things that my clients present with when I'm coaching them in the summer is, they do so well in the spring and they tend to have a flow going in the fall. But in the summer, with the company in their house and the traveling across country and the camping trips, the days at the lake, there is so much more challenge in terms of having to navigate food and alcohol differently. And here's one of the main reasons I think we're challenged. We're challenged because we associate fun with food and alcohol. Every ad you ever see, every party you ever go to, every social situation mostly that you engage with is going to involve some opportunity to make some less than stellar food choices and to consume alcohol, because that's the world we live in. And it has made us believe that we are not fun and we will not have fun if we don't indulge in those things, which is insane. It's basically saying, I'm not a fun person. I'm not a worthy person of hanging out with and spending time with unless I'm eating food that people press on me or alcohol that people offer me. And what we're really doing is sacrificing what we say that we want most for what we want in the moment. We kid ourselves that indulging in food and alcohol is freedom. I hear this a lot. Clients will, when we're talking through this type of thing, they'll often say, gosh, I really associate eating whatever I want and drinking whatever I want with freedom. Freedom is also feeling so good in your body and feeling so energized and so confident that there's nothing that you are scared of taking on. You live life so much bigger and more free because you no longer feel restricted by your behaviors, right? So there is a different way of thinking about freedom when it comes to food and alcohol. And I'll tell you this, very rarely in my history there was a day where I was very easily swayed by people pushing alcohol and food on me. And I felt like I had no choice. I didn't want to make them feel bad. And I just ate the thing. Now, I could have rationalized that was out of love for myself. I'm going to give myself this thing out of love. But if I ultimately want something different for my life, that's not really love. What that is me being unwilling to face discomfort in the moment and kind of seeking out a false pleasure, which in this case would be food and alcohol. So often, for example, if I walk into a party, I do believe there's a part of me that is very introverted. I wouldn't say I'm entirely introverted because I can be very extroverted as well. So I don't think I understand the whole where my balance is with that, but I do think there is a part of me that doesn't always love being in large groups. And when I go to a party, like many people, those first few minutes, I feel uncomfortable. It's kind of like it feels like all eyes are on you and you're trying to engage in conversations with people you don't know all that well. And you're just trying to get grounded in those first few minutes. And so those first few minutes are the worst possible time you could be making decisions around food and alcohol, because we tend to reach for the alcohol right away. We tend to fill up our plate right away because that's a really easy way to distract ourselves from all the discomfort that we're actually feeling. And here's the thing, when we distract ourselves from the discomfort of what we're feeling, we can't really honor what we're feeling. So there's been many occasions over the past couple of years where I've gone into a social situation where I felt really itchy and I felt really uncomfortable and I felt like I just wasn't having fun. And if I covered all that up with food and alcohol, I would have just kind of forced my way through it, but not really enjoyed myself in an authentic way. And now what I do is if those feelings boil up for me, to me, that is an indication I'm in the wrong place. I am not meant to be here. This does not feel like the right decision for me in this moment, and I'll leave. If I have to be somewhere where I have to drink alcohol and eat food to have a good time, that is not a space or place that I am meant to be. That is my attitude these days, and holy cow, does it serve me well. Another reason we're challenged in a lot of these situations is because everyone else is doing it. There's this part of us that wants to conform, kind of a herd mentality, that we're somehow different or something's wrong with us if we don't participate. And it's crazy to me to think that we live in a culture that really honors uniqueness, right? Like it's if you have a special talent or skill or personality trait, like we really celebrate that. And at the same time, we try to be like everybody else. If you have not visited the month that we did all about self-leadership, I would really encourage you to go back. I believe it was the month of February, one of my favorite months we ever did on this podcast. And the reason I would direct your attention there is because I operate as a health coach that improving your health is all about your ability to lead yourself. Lead yourself in social situations. Lead yourself in what feels right for you versus following a lot of cookie cutter protocols, right? It's about being self-directed, knowing yourself so deeply, being so authentic that you are okay with creating boundaries and living life a little differently than the people around you. To me, that's what health is. And that is a very scary thing for a lot of people to do because they've been living their entire life making everyone else happy and doing what everyone else is doing. So they have some really interesting beliefs about what it means when they start taking responsibility for their own life and their own happiness. So another reason we're very challenged when we're out of routine in the summer, and specifically when we're in social situations, is we do a lot of comparison. I talked a lot about this on last week's episode, so you can always go back and listen to that. But there's this thought that plays in our head often for women when we're in social situations, comparing ourselves to somebody else. And we say things to ourselves like, she can get away with it. How come she can do it and get away with it, but I can't? To which my question is, if you've ever been around children, if you have a child, if you've ever babysat a child, is that what you would tell a kid? Well, he's doing it, Mom. So isn't it okay that I do it? He set his house on fire. Isn't it okay that I do it? That's a terrible way to run your life. It assumes zero responsibility. And furthermore, this is what I dove deep into last week. You have no idea what someone's health story is by looking at them. I made a post recently about exactly that. And I said, assuming somebody's health, the depth of their health by how they look, is like assuming you know somebody's life by what they post on social media. All they're showing you is their highlight reel. You have no idea what's really happening in their life. Just like you can look at someone's physicality, you have no idea what's happening with their health. Comparison does not serve you. Stop doing it. We also have a thought. This is one I come up against a lot with clients. I deserve it. I worked really hard this week. I worked out hard. My diet was on point all week. I worked really hard at my job. I accomplished something really big, so I deserve it. We also look at it as stress management, right? That's really what we're saying. I think in many cases that I deserve it, that I'm so burnt out or I'm so exhausted or tired from the week that I've lived that now I'm going to manage that stress momentarily. It really is momentarily with food and alcohol. But here's the truth. You aren't really managing stress with food and alcohol. You're contributing to it. If it's food that doesn't really work for your body, or if it's food that your body doesn't really recognize as food because it's so highly processed. So that's something to consider. If you are using food and alcohol as rationale for managing stress, and holy cow, does our culture do this with alcohol, right? There's so many memes and social media quotes that are always floating around that we have to be drinking. to be sane parents. We have to drink to have fun. We have to drink to, so there is all of this cultural pressure. But you're not really managing stress. You're adding to it. You are adding to your total stress load. Momentarily, you're distracting yourself from your stress, but you're not really dealing with it. Mindlessness is another reason we're really challenged when we travel, when we're out of routine, when we're in social situations. We just aren't paying attention. And we're also not very good at just allowing temptation. So what that you're tempted to have a glass of alcohol, but you committed to yourself that you weren't going to drink for a while? So what that you want to eat 3 more pieces of pizza? You had 1, so what that you want to have 3 more? Like, when did it become a bad thing to be tempted by something and not engage with it? Isn't that what we teach our kids? I hope it's what we teach our kids. Just because you have money doesn't mean you have to spend it, right? Just because you want to punch someone in the face doesn't mean you do it. Just because you're tempted to do something doesn't mean you have to respond to the temptation. Just feel tempted. Let the feeling of temptation move through you. It's not an emergency. Finally, I just want to address this, and I say finally, but this is a big conversation. I could go on and on and on about all the challenges that people face with kind of the things that happen in the summer around food and alcohol. But one of the big reasons I think a lot of people struggle is that they're unprepared. So they're going on these trips, and they're going camping, and they're going to the lake, and they're having company in their home, and all these things. And they're often going into them tired and stressed and hungry and ill-equipped. And what I mean by ill-equipped is they have done they put no forethought and no planning into how they can take care of themselves despite the fact that their schedule changed or despite the fact that they're doing something out of routine. So let's talk a little bit about some solutions, okay? We talked a lot about challenges. Let me just give you a few solutions. And please hear, it's just a few, because this could be like an entire podcast in and of itself that someone addresses these solutions every single week. There's that many solutions. But here are the big ones. These are the kind of the ones you can apply right away. Always plan before you go. So every time you know you're going to a barbecue, you know you're going to the lake, you know you're going camping, you know you're going on a trip, think about how you are going to manage your self-care given that scenario. Now, one of the easiest ways, I think, to pre-plan and manage our self-care is consider what will the permissions be and what will the boundaries be. I love this way of thinking, permissions and boundaries, because permissions are healthy. I really deeply believe that. Granting yourself permission for a glass of wine on occasion can be really healthy. Granting yourself permission to have a piece of wedding cake, if you're mindful with it and eating it slowly and really enjoying it, that can be healthy. But permissions are dangerous when they don't have boundaries, right? And boundaries are such a big part of health in so many different spaces, right? We have to have boundaries with other people. We have to have boundaries with our work. We have to have boundaries with ourselves. And so let's just say that I'm going to a barbecue tomorrow, and I decide in advance I am going to have a glass of wine, or I'm going to have a glass of beer. Great, I have defined I am going to have a glass. That's one glass. And the boundary is that's it, no more. And when I have done that, set the boundaries given myself the permission and set the boundary, it really makes me kind of operate differently when I go to that barbecue. Am I going to have the alcohol right away? Nope, because I'm only going to have one glass. So I want to make sure that I choose it at a time where I really want it, that I'm fully present with it, that I go slow with it, because it's the only one I'm giving myself, because I decided that in advance when my goals and my future self were in the forefront of my mind. Another thing that you can do easily is stay conscious of your value system and your choices. Are your choices in line with what you say is important to you? It's really important for me to get control of my health this year. And then you go to a party and you completely derail with food and alcohol. Or reclaiming my health this year is really important to me, but I go on vacation and I completely let all caution go to the wind, telling myself that I'll just get back on track when I get home. I don't think that's really necessary. Yes, in some ways, again, people would argue that's freedom. I would say that's rationalization for not showing up for yourself in any way. And that can get us into a lot of trouble. I would also say stay aware of how you are feeling in these spaces and places as you go through the summer. And notice how you feel is driving a lot of your decision making. If you're feeling insecure or stressed or disappointed or irritated, think you're going to make really good choices around food and alcohol? Probably not. So when you're feeling those things, you have two options. You can either change the way you're thinking about the situation you're in, so you're not just reaching for food and alcohol, or you get out of the situation. Again, maybe it's not a place you're supposed to be. I keep saying this, maybe it's not a place you're supposed to be, because women especially, I find, are not very good at giving themselves permission to remove themselves from places and spaces that are not nourishing them. We think just because we went to a party, we have to stay there until it's over. We think just because we agreed to take our child to a birthday party, we can't leave early. We put all of these conditions and regulations on ourselves for how we're supposed to operate in the world. And the only person who created that manual is you. And you get to change it anytime. So instead of reaching for things that are going to temporarily make you feel better because you're so uncomfortable, you either work on changing your thinking or you remove yourself from the things that are making you so uncomfortable. Finally, I just want to say this, because this is, I feel like, one of the biggest and most powerful takeaways, is the practice of realigning yourself. This is actually an entire segment that I teach within the Consistency Code program. But realigning is an art, and it's a practice. Everything I teach is a practice. And here's why I say practice. Practice allows room for error. It says, I'm not perfect at this. I probably will never be perfect at this. I'm just going to keep practicing it because it's something worthy of practicing. Practicing just gives you so much ability, more acceptance of failure without making it mean that you have to quit. Because when you give yourself the ability to practice, it means you're giving yourself permission to screw up and make mistakes and be a little messy, and you're still going to show up the next day. Because that's what health is. If you want to be a healthy person in life, you have to be willing to practice being healthy. It's not a perfection thing. It's just a practice thing. So realignment is a practice. And what I see a lot of women doing this time of year in the middle of July is things are starting to get busier with the kids because they've got all their activities and we're trying to make things really great for them. Maybe we're traveling a lot. Maybe we're just really trying to fully enjoy our summer. So we tell ourselves, you know what, I'll just get back on track in September. And here's what I want to tell you. No, you won't. Not in the way that you think you will. Not with the perseverance that you could have. And here's why I say this. I see women doing the exact same thing around the holidays. Between November and New Year's, a lot of women are just saying, nope, my hands are off the wheel. I'm not going to worry about my own self-care. I'll recommit January 1st. And then you know what happens January 1st? They either commit so hard, like they sign up for ridiculous programs, they change their whole life overnight to try to, start exercising every day, radically overhaul their diet, all of those things, which of course they start failing miserably with in just a few days or a few weeks. Or they can't even, get traction at all because they're feeling so lousy in their bodies chemically because of all the things they did over the past 6 to 8 weeks. Or they're getting sick. because literally their immune system is suppressed from all the alcohol, all the sugar, all the late nights, because there were no boundaries. And it was just a free-for-all. Now they're sick. And this is the same thing I see happen at the end of summer. If we have that attitude that I'm just not going to do anything until September 1st. I don't believe creating your best summer ever is saying self-care doesn't matter. I believe the only way that you can create your best summer ever is by putting a lot of time and attention on yourself. Now, does that mean that it has to look like a particular workout program and crazy, diet applications and all those? Of course not. But creating your best summer ever doesn't mean you aren't taken care of. It means that you are. So you will get misaligned. You will have a weekend away. You'll take a camping trip. You'll go to a party where you just take it a little too far, or you compromise some of your boundaries. And it doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means that, now I recognize I'm misaligned. And here's I think it's very important for all of you listening to identify, how do you know you're misaligned? It's a really important question to ask yourself. For me personally, I get very reactive. I get very unexcited about kind of like life in general. I tend to gravitate towards foods that I normally wouldn't eat. I feel tired all the time. Those are all symptoms to me, and not the only ones, but some of the big ones that show me that I'm misaligned. And as soon as I can identify that I'm misaligned, I quickly get to work at doing what I can to realign myself. I know what my anchors are. I know the things that pivot me really quickly. Sleep is one of them. I put myself to bed early and I commit to getting a good night's sleep. I plan my food for the next day because I know that when I'm eating well, my chemistry is so much happier, which means I'm happier. I move my body. Know what your anchors are. What helps you to realign with how you really want to feel quickly. And I say quickly because the quicker you can recognize that you are misaligned, the more easily you can realign yourself. But the opposite is also true. The longer you are misaligned, the more difficult it will be to realign yourself. So realigning, again, is a practice. It also really should be the rule of your life to be in a space of alignment. Misalignment should be the exception. And here's what I mean by that. I see a lot of women operating where misalignment is like the status, like that's how they live most of their life, in misalignment. And once in a great while, they'll get a hair across their butt and decide to realign themselves, but they do it in such a way that they can't really sustain it. So then they go right back to being misaligned for months or years or sometimes the rest of their life. Misalignment should be the exception, not the rule. And it is going to happen. It's a normal part of life to get misaligned. But we have to commit and recommit fiercely to realigning. And we do that out of love for ourselves, right? It's just kind of like when you have an argument with your spouse or your partner or your kid. You love that person so fiercely that I hope you don't stay in a space of upset and anger for very long, right? You course correct. You have a conversation. You sit down. You talk about it like adults. You work through it because you're so committed to the health of the relationship. And that's what we need to be doing with our behaviors. Recommitting or fiercely committing to realigning ourselves because we are so committed to the health of the relationship that we have with ourselves. And that's really, at the end of the day, what health is to me. Right? The depth of your health is a reflection of the depth of your relationship with yourself. Because when I'm talking about health, I'm not just talking about blood profile numbers. I'm not talking about just being disease-free. I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about feeling at peace in your heart and soul. And yes, I am also talking about physical health. All right, I feel like we covered a lot. I hope it wasn't too much. I hope it made sense. The objective really was to just kind of highlight some of the ways in which I see women struggling, and also ways in which I have struggled in my own life and still do in many cases. And then I presented you with some solutions, some things you could try on in order to start, getting yourself realigned, right? Planning, staying conscious, going slow with your choices, staying conscious of how you're feeling and conscious of how those feelings are driving your actions, allowing emotion, and really having a plan for getting back on track when you find yourself misaligned. And only you can really decide what actions realign you. I will say for most people, it's kind of the ones that I cover in 5 to Thrive, which are, definitely take responsibility for how you're thinking, take responsibility for how much you're resting, how much you're moving your body, eating a diet of whole foods, and hydrating. And I would also add to that just connection and community. Like those are all things that definitely for most people help realign. All right, my friends, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that was useful to you. Please let me know if it was. I always like getting feedback, even if you didn't find it useful, as long as you have constructive criticism on how I could do better. I'm open to that too, always. Just be careful in your delivery, right? We always want to give criticism in a very compassionate way. And with a lot of things I see online, I wish more people would operate that way. So have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.